Good evening and welcome to a first. I think this is the first time in a year's episodes worth of the Magpie Circle that Notts County are sitting on top of the league. Don't care if it's only one game. Nico, you've got to take it while you can, can't you?
Yeah. It's a fickle game. Enjoy it while you can.
Good to see you, Kev. Kev will be giving us the lowdown from Torquay perspective and the Great Escape artiste. That's a very nice bedroom you've got there, Kev.
The kids have kicked me out, so it was either go downstairs and everybody gets to listen to my three running riot, or try and find an angle that doesn't make it look like I'm so obviously in a bedroom, which I've failed horribly to do. So
yeah, I know Nottinghamshire are playing cricket at Trent Bridge tonight. Leigh, you're not at the back of the old sight screen, are you? Because it kind of looks like a cricket side screen there that you're at the back of.
No, I've resorted to the conservatory tonight for tonight's show. So various rooms have been taken up. So I've been booted out in here. So unfortunately, the Wi-Fi signal's still holding up. So that's all good.
Very good. Conservatory, bedroom, my usual office here with a few shirts. You might recognise one or two of them there, Kev. Now then, let's get a few observations straight in. Leigh, really looking forward to this 3-point Saturday, and I think we will beat Wrexham on Monday, but a point will also be good. Atmosphere is going to be off the chain. Does he mean? I don't know if he means off the chart. Kelvin Hallam. Max Seth can't wait for Saturday, especially when Carl Cameron scores and shushes the Torquay fans. Chris Jordan, not sure the word has spread regarding the free tickets for NHS workers, but hopefully plenty have heard and taken advantage. We did mention that on the show on Monday evening. Kelvin Hallam back in his usual seats on the cop. Good evening, gents, says Steve Orton. Evening all, says Chris Jordan. Okay, on the show tonight, clearly, we want to look ahead to Torquay with the expertise of Kev Nicholson. Leigh is on his jollies, but we'll see what little insights he can give us ahead of a busy double-header weekend, Torquay and Wrexham. And I also want to talk a little bit about the cash that's been spent in the National League, the big money signings. Kev is head of coaching at Exeter, and how that affects League Two. Given that 4 or 5 clubs have signed players that probably most of League Two and half of League One would have struggled to finance. And also, just to explore a little bit more that we touched on Monday, the working party that's been established by the National League to look into putting in a salary cap for the start of next season with a reported, I can't see this getting in, but a reported salary budget cap of 900,000. We're potentially looking here at several clubs having players not far off a quarter of that entire salary cap. Let's kick off with Kev. Great to have you back on, Kev.
Thanks for having me again.
Yes, no, always good, always good. How times change. We got stuffed 4-2 down at Plainmoor. We now play each other again, sadly, in the National League. Torquay, I suppose, heartbreak of heartbreaks in the way they missed out. They get gupped on the opening day of the season. We spoke about not always easy to bounce back from playoffs. Notts edge it at Barnet on Saturday. We all read too much into the first game of the season, don't we? But nevertheless, it's better to have won it than lost it at home, isn't it?
I think so. I vividly remember having a pre-season at Notts where I felt like we were going to win the league. We'd had an amazing pre-season. Everything had gone brilliantly. And then we travelled down to Bristol City and got absolutely smashed 5-0. It was about 4-0 at half-time. We turned up 20 minutes before kick-off. They wouldn't move it back, and all of that good feeling and all of that goodwill built up throughout the pre-season went to pieces in one afternoon. So a 5-0 win away from home is certainly going to, I think, like one of the comments, it's going to help the atmosphere at the first home game. It's going to get a few Notts fans smiling, and obviously for any manager who is going to be under a certain amount of scrutiny, I think after coming in like he did, it's perfect for him to kick the season off that way.
So you've been there as a player. You've been there as a manager and in this league as well. Do you, as a professional, have an inkling or a real insight into you saying, we've had a great pre-season, we're going to do really well this year, or conversely, you think, blimey, I need 8 more players, bloody hell. Or do you really actually not have a clue? Do things just completely surprise you? Because every club in the country, before a ball is kicked, think they can win promotion, don't they?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because you want to go into the season feeling upbeat. You want the fans to be upbeat and ambitious, and you want the players to feel like they can go and accomplish anything. And if you'd have asked the 22-year-old me when on that pre-season I just spoke about Notts, I'd have told you that with the group we've got, there's every chance of us winning the league. I think if you're asking me now, I've been around too many pre-seasons to know that, I've gone through pre-seasons where you've never won a game, you think it's going to be a disaster, and all of a sudden you start like an absolute house on fire and the season becomes easier. You've got that momentum, you've got that good feel. I've had other pre-seasons, like I mentioned there, where they've been brilliant. You play great football, but it's false. You cannot. There are certain things in football you can't replicate. You can't replicate the pressure of a penalty shootout. No matter how hard you try, no matter how many lads you get behind the goal, pulling faces and screaming at your mates, try and put them off in training, it's just not the same. And you can't replicate real football when there's 3 points on it, the intensity levels of National League or League Two compared to a nice pre-season run out against the Championship team where everybody's passing the ball and feeling like they can play. It's completely different, and you just cannot replicate it. So I think again, it's just getting off the mark, getting those points on the board. It's a relief. It's a relief. It takes a little bit of pressure off, and I'm sure Notts go into this game feeling absolutely fantastic. And Torquay will be a little bit nervous because it's a tough one to get beat at home like that.
Leigh, we spoke a lot, didn't we, about pre-season, the importance of pre-season, but results, do they really matter at all? And Notts, I think, lost 3 and drew 1 of their last 4 pre-season games. There were a few goals being leaked. We all talk about, we'll be fine going forward, but we need to eradicate things at the back, etc., 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 etc. And then and you were at the game Saturday. It couldn't have clicked any better. All the strikers score, clean sheet, set piece goal. Yeah, couldn't have gone any better. What was Ian's reaction like when he was talking with you after the game?
Oh, he's naturally delighted. I mean, it was the perfect start, wasn't it? Clean sheet, 5 goals, all 3 of your key players for the season who are going to be pivotal to getting out this league, all on the score sheet. It was an utterly dominant, ruthless display. I thought they were absolutely fantastic from the first minute until last. I thought they dominated the game. There was only one real scare, was when Sam had to make a save from Mason Bloomfield. But aside from that, it was utterly dominant. And I think it reinforced once again why it's so key to keep Callum Roberts, Ruben Rodrigues, Carl Wootton fit and firing this season, because I know there's been a lot of debate about money being spent across the division, and there's been some unbelievable business being carried out. Shamanga at Chesterfield, Mullin at Wrexham. A few others in there, but I don't think when they're on that kind of form, I don't think there's a better attacking trio in the league, and I think that's why they're so important. Just to keep them fit, because Callum for me is probably the best player in the National League. I think Ruben won't be far behind him if he carries on the form that he showed towards the back end of last season and coming into this one. And we have to pay credit to Ian Burchnall, because it was a masterstroke to move in position and play him as that second striker. And Carl Wootton, in terms of his goals output is very, very good, but the amount of hard yards he does, the unselfish work, he's a fantastic centre forward. So yeah, brilliant start to the season, top of the league. Fans loved it. And what a real shot in the arm in terms of confidence as well. The players looked like they thoroughly enjoyed themselves.
Indeed, they did. It is only one game, but I just want to pick up on a point you've mentioned there, Leigh, in terms of the quality of Cal, the quality of Ruben. Kev, you're head of coaching at a very well-run Exeter. You've produced a lot of players. You trade at least break even and make profits where you can. So I think it's an excellent model of a club. how likely is it, or do you think, that clubs in the Football League would already be looking? I'm not just talking specifically Cal Roberts, but how much do clubs in League One, League Two look at what's going on in the National League to evaluate and target players? And what is it that persuades them to take them, if you know what I mean?
Well, I think not just League Two and not just our club. Football as a whole now has got such a web of scouts and informants, and everybody knows everything that's going off all over the place. So I think talent spotting, talent ID, I think has become huge, and so I don't think anything goes under the radar. I think that it's harder to spot those players that are going to be fantastic value that you might get for free, or that might have maybe dropped from above that people have kind of given up on, and you can find something there because they've got a pedigree or they've lost their way, and you can find something there. That's the harder part of doing it. Watching a guy banging in goals in the National League is pretty easy to spot that he could probably do it in League Two, because although there is an obvious gap in quality from League Two to the National League, it's not massive. I think that the gaps get bigger, the jumps get bigger as you go up. So League Two to League One, I think, is quite considerable, which is why there's quite a lot of yo-yo clubs that go up and down there, and the same from League One to the Championship, and obviously Championship to Premier League. But I think as you go down, that gets a bit smaller. My experience of it was as a player in the National League. If I had a quick player, I could give him a little bit of room because generally he wasn't good enough to deliver. And if I had a good technician, I could get tight because generally he wasn't quick enough to be athletic enough to get past me. If you get in League Two, it was a bit of a shock to me in those kind of early stages when I'd got back there after being in the National League for 5 years, that actually if I didn't get tight, they were good enough to cross it. And if I got too tight, they were quick enough to get past me. And they're the little bits that catch players out when they start to kind of rise up through those leagues again. But yeah, I think the problem, or not the problem, but the obvious thing is there's some massive clubs, Notts being one of them, in the National League. So there's not enough money out there for too many clubs to be paying fees and then paying the wages of players like you've talked about there that are at Notts, because, if Notts were in League Two, you'd have a similar kind of budget, if not more than what Exeter have. So it's not about poaching players. It's just about having an eye on what there is and knowing where the value's at. Unless you're a Salford off the top of my head, who can pick who they want, get who they want, and pay them what they want, in which case it's kid in the sweet shop type of thing.
You mentioned Salford there. So as I understand this, and this kind of brings us a little bit onto salary cap, the Football League spoke about a salary cap. And I think for a little while there's been some form of, is it like a recommended salary cap in League Two, but it's not actually compulsory?
I'm sure everybody lives by that.
I'm saying, my argument, you couldn't get a salary cap in after just what's happened with the pandemic. When are you going to get a compulsory salary cap in the Football League? Yeah,
I think with most things, there's always a way that, they had the financial fair play where you're only supposed to pay 60% of your income. So wealthy owners go and sponsor one of the stands for X million. So therefore your income's massive, and you can navigate your way around this if you've got anybody that's savvy enough to do it. And it will continue to happen until someone says you can only go above this or only go to this limit. But as it stands at the moment, you could reel off at least 8-10 clubs in the National League that would be financially big enough hitters in League Two and potentially going into League One. So League Two teams looking at the National League and thinking they're going to take the pick of the best players, it doesn't work like that from a transfer point of view. It might work like that when one of them knows they're running out, the contract's running down and they can get them for free at the end of the season. Yeah. Because in the National League, you tend not to sign. You look at the Premier League boys, they get 2 years left on the contract and everybody talks about a move because they need to tie them down. Well, a 2-year contract in the National League, security.
So salary cap, 900 grand, Leigh. Any chance they're going to get it in?
No chance. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you sort of agree with in principle because you want football clubs not to overspend their means. We saw what happened with Notts County a few years ago, and even beyond that, once you start spending beyond your means, things get invariably tight. You gamble on the big dream, and then all of a sudden you're left with a big squad on big wages. You can't offload them because either the players don't want to go because they're on big money, And then in the end, it all comes crashing down. So I kind of understand why they would want to bring in a salary cap, but at the same time, I don't really agree with limiting clubs' ambitions, if that makes sense. If you have got the owners who are, good with their money and they're wealthy, then why shouldn't they be allowed to spend it as long as they're not putting the clubs at risk? So for instance, if Notts were, I don't know, say 5 years down the line, get taken over by some big Dubai sheikh and he's got the money, why should he be hampered by a salary cap? I just don't. I think it's a great thing in principle, but I just don't see how it could work. And I would imagine the likes of Chesterfield, Wrexham, Notts, etc., would probably argue, well, who are you to tell us how we should spend our money and limit our ambitions? You could quite understand it for somebody like a Dover or a Kings Lynn, of course, but I think when you look at the National League now and you look at the size of the clubs in it and the money that's being thrown around, I would say there's more money in the National League this year than there's been for League Two in a number of years. I know Kev was just talking about clubs. You look at, there's only a couple in the League Two that I can think of: Salford, Forest Green Rovers, off the bat, who could probably throw money around. But if you look at the National League, Chesterfield, Wrexham, Notts, big clubs, big money. Stockport's another one we've not mentioned. So yeah, I think it's a nice ideal, but I don't think it'll get past now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll get it in, but I've gone on record previously to be fair, I am an advocate of a salary cap. The counter argument to what you guys have just been saying is that you have an owner, while that owner is prepared to bankroll the club, because most owners, when they put money into a club, that club isn't run on a sound financial footing. That club is run on the capability of an individual person to prop it up and splash a load of cash. And whatever they're happy enough to splash the cash, that club is fine. It isn't actually trading particularly solvently. It will lose 2 million a year, 3 million a year, whatever it is. While ever owner A is prepared to fund those losses, the club trades solvently. But what happens when you get these changes of ownership? Because the problem when you have the change of ownership is that the players may be on 2-3 year contracts. No fault of the player, but clearly they're not going to waive those contracts free and say, "Oh, that's fair enough. You can't afford to pay us anymore." I mean, certainly one halfway house I think I would look at would be any new change of owner at a football club should have to put some form of bond in to the Football League. So if you buy a club, National League, League One, League Two, you have a sliding scale. So it might be £100,000 that you put in as a bond to the National League, 150 grand League Two, 200 grand League One. So that if the club then has problems after you leave or whatever, there is at least an emergency fund that tides the club over. And if someone wants to buy a football club and can't afford to put 100 grand in or 150 grand in, they shouldn't be buying a football club. How many times do we see that somebody buys a football club for £1, takes the debt on, and then looks to secure loans against the ground and all of those sorts of things? And I think, you look at Bury, which was clearly, a difficult case. I mean, you look at us. 12 years ago to the day, Nico, I don't know what you were up to. Notts County, 12 years ago on this day, were signing a massive name. Do you know who it was?
Sol Campbell.
Oh, Leigh's coming early. Yeah. I bet you knew Nico, though, didn't you? But I bet you knew.
I did. I never got to play against him. We'd just been promoted that year, so we were coming into League Two, and I think we played at Meadow Lane. We got a 2-2 draw with Schmeichel playing in goal, but we never got to play against Sol. I think that one game up at Morecambe scared him off, didn't it?
Good. Great knowledge. One game at Morecambe, I was there. We can say we saw Sol Campbell play. Not sure he fancied it too much. We lost 3-2, I think. Schmeichel, Casper almost got an equaliser right at the end with an overhead kick. Yeah, and then he turned up apparently. So the story goes, it was a team photo call. They got a later one for some reason, and Sol didn't turn up for the team photo call, and that was it. He just left.
Having played a few times at Morecambe's old ground, I can, if I was a multi-millionaire that had just been playing in the Champions League, I'd probably leave it there as well if I were him.
Yes, good knowledge. 12 years ago to the day. Sobering thought. Let's get back to this weekend. Okay, your specialist knowledge, Nico. Torquay. We've spoken a bit before. It is very difficult, isn't it, when you miss out on a playoff campaign to get up an early head of steam. Still there, Kev?
Sorry, yeah, you went off for a minute there.
It's when you lose out in any playoff campaign, it is very difficult as a club to get up an early head of steam the following season. It's very difficult not to have some form of hangover, isn't it? You know, and we would look at Stockport as well on Saturday.
It is. I think I would wager that their problem has been more the turnover of players and the limited time that they've had because of the playoff run to be able to get in and bed in what their replacements were. Having heartbreakingly known exactly how they feel. This was probably 13 years ago, losing out in the playoffs to Exeter, quite a famous kind of playoff semi-final where Torquay were 2 goals to the good with 20 minutes to go, and we got beat 4-3 and ended up losing on aggregate. And the following season, we were all still together. Most lads had signed 2-year contracts. There was a couple of reinforcements came in, 1 or 2 went, but generally speaking, the core of what had been through that season was still there, and we had a point to prove. And so we were very, very focused and very driven. And I mean, having said that, we didn't actually start that well, but we certainly kicked on, and that was the year that we got promoted. This off season, obviously, you've mentioned the lad that you signed. That I'm sure is going to get some stick on Saturday. Yeah, he's a good, solid National League, lower league centre half. I don't think he'll pull up trees, but I also don't think he'll let anyone down. He's more of an old school centre half. I watched him a few times over the last couple of seasons. He was a bit of a fan's favourite. I think from what I picked up, he was pretty popular. He certainly plays the social media game quite well. I've seen 1 or 2 of his comments that I never comment on, but they do make me giggle from time to time. And I think, we've had there's a few lads that have left that have had that kind of thing, and it becomes friendly banter generally. Never tends to get too nasty. It does, but I can guarantee, like you said, if he scores, there'll be something done, and if not, and if Torquay manage to win, there'll be plenty said on Twitter on the way back down the motorway. But he's a solid guy. But if you look at how many players they've lost and like I say, they've not had a full off season to replace them. That's quite tough, even for a manager as good as what Gary Johnson is. That's quite tough. You need a little bit of luck that people come in and gel immediately. You've lost some good, Whitfield was a very good player for them, who's gone. They've lost some pace, they've lost some experience, and they've brought in some decent players, but they're decent players that haven't played with each other before. And so you're back to not square one, but certainly a couple of steps back from where you were. And I've no doubt a manager of Gary Johnson's experience and some of the players they brought in, they'll have a reasonably good season. It's just a bad time to have missed out on penalties like that when all of a sudden you've got Ryan Reynolds and TikTok and what ploughing money into the National League and stop or having a go, and Notts County are always going to be competitive with what they do. Them this season, they're going to really have to earn it, because if anybody that goes up this year has really deserved it.
Yeah, we've spoken before, Kev, that this year this is Notts' 3rd season in the National League. Without a doubt, Leigh, this is the toughest year to get out, isn't it?
I think it's the toughest that I've ever known. I mean, I did a couple of years in the National League with Lincoln when they got relegated from the Football League, and there wasn't really in those seasons, it wasn't that as competitive. You didn't have a series of big spenders. You didn't have teams paying 250 grand for a striker. You didn't have teams reportedly paying $4,000 a week for a centre forward. You just didn't get it. But this year, I look at it and I just think it's so tough across the board. And you look at the calibre of managers in there now as well. I mean, you've got Phil Parkinson at Wrexham. You've got obviously Neil at Solihull. You've got Ian at Notts County. You've got Gary Johnson at Torquay. You've got all these fantastic managers going up against each other. It's I know it will be fascinating to see who comes out on top, because there's going to be some really brilliant games, and obviously we've got one coming up around the corner against Wrexham, haven't we, on Bank Holiday Monday? So it will be tough, because I think there's just so many good players in the league this year. Across the board, you look at Shamanga at Chesterfield, Mullin. Wrexham went out and signed James Jones from Lincoln. He's a League One midfielder all day long. Really good player, and yet he's dropped down to non-league, because I imagine Wrexham have given him a decent contract. So I think the calibre of the league gets better and better every year, and I think it's going to be an absolute a great ride, especially for all the supporters and the neutrals.
What's your take, Kev, on mentality of players? So, compare and contrast. Good friend of yours, when he was down at Torquay, Mark Ellis, coming into towards the twilight of his career, 32, 33. Brilliant for us. He's gone back into the Football League with Barrow, club captain under Mark Cooper, playing Aston Villa on the telly last night. By the way, what an outrageous Panenka penalty as well. If you've not seen it, unbelievable. One of the Aston Villa guys did. But I digress. So Mark has taken a decision to get back into the Football League towards the end of his career. He gets a game against Aston Villa very early on, all of that sort of thing, which presumably still gives you a buzz at that age of your career. And yet there are players who, so Paul Mullin has fired Cambridge, got promotion, then drops out of the Football League altogether. Paddy Madden, doing well at Fleetwood, drops out of the Football League altogether. And maybe Shamanga could have got a league move or not, I don't know. On the face of it, yes, it's a step up to a larger club, but many people have said he's one of the top 5 players in the National League for a couple of seasons now. He's still in it. Talk me through mentality of players and ambition, and how do you weigh those things up?
So I went off there. Myself and some of the guys I played with when I was, kind of starting, we often had those kind of discussions as to what would you rather? Would you rather be playing 50 games a season in the National League, but not earning particularly great money, which it was back then, or would you rather be sat on a bench higher up, earning good money? When you're in these lower leagues, if somebody like Wrexham comes and offers you what could potentially be $4 or $5 a week, or you could be on $2 a week on a 1 or 2 year contract in League One, you've got family, you've got responsibilities, you've got kids, you've got all that kind of thing to weigh up, and you've got a very, very short window to earn your money. So I can see it from both sides. For me, the holy grail is always the Football League. As a footballer, realistically, if you're a lower league footballer and certainly if you get into your kind of late 20s, early 30s, you're not going to get that move to the Championship where you don't have to worry about anything ever again. So for me, it was always about trying to play as high as I possibly could. However, I was a left back. No one was very likely to come and offer me $5 a week to go and play in the National League. So, the difference for me earning a reasonable wage in the National League or the same in League Two, or go to the National League for a couple £100 a week more, what's the point? I wanted to play at the highest possible level. And I know lads that have got that mentality. At the same time, if somebody comes and absolutely blows your mind with an offer like that, that's life-changing money that we're talking about there. For a young man that wouldn't have had that before. Mullin, for how well he did last year, he's not got a history of massive seasons of scoring goals. I think last year was his first real big hit. He's cashed in on it. The other side to that is you go into a club that's got some crazy resource now from Hollywood. I'm sure there's a huge amount of perks that go with that, and a fascination and an interest. And I'm interested. I'm fascinated to see how it all goes there. I don't blame him. The one thing, I mean, the only the equivalent we had when I was playing was Danny Kedwell left Gillingham in League One to go and sign for Ebbsfleet when they got taken over and had a load of money.
Yeah,
and he was interviewed in the non-league paper talking about how he's done it for ambition and this and that. And I personally would rather them just say, do you know what, I've done it because they've absolutely weighed me in, and you might well get promoted, and I might get a few years out of this. That for me would be an honest, straightforward. If you're a fan, how can you hold that against? This is that almost that disconnect between real life and football, where if you're working an office job, as much as you might be liking it, if a rival company comes in and offers you 25, 50 grand a year more, chances are you're going to go and see your boss and go, look, I love it here. I really enjoyed this. However, this has happened. In football, if you do that, you can get absolutely battered by thousands of people. I don't know many office workers that have been booed on the way out to take a better job. So I think it's a fascinating industry. This is why I love it. I like these kind of conversations because it's really, really interesting having seen it from both sides, I suppose. But I don't blame the guys for going and taking the money. It doesn't always work. Let's be really clear. The one thing I'll say while Leigh was talking, I was thinking he's reeled off half a dozen clubs there. I guarantee you that there'll be 2 of those at least that don't even make the playoffs because something doesn't click, something doesn't happen. As good as the manager might be, they get something wrong. They get carried away with spending money. They maybe get bad characters that they didn't understand were bad characters, but they've scored a load of goals at the last club they were at, and all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And I guarantee there'll be other clubs that no one had given a second thought to that will make the playoffs, because there always is. There's always going to be a club that comes from nowhere that maybe has money that you don't know about, or maybe just has a really good team spirit. And it has, when we got promoted, it was Histon. I mean, Histon, I don't know where they are now. I don't know, but it was a rough and tumble ground. It was intimidating. They had a lower league crazy gang kind of feel.
Was John Beck the manager then? Was John Beck the manager?
He was part of it.
John Beck was manager, yeah. So you got on the pitch and there were stones everywhere. And,
grass was on in the corner.
The changing room had a rotten fish down the back of the radiator and all that kind of classic John Beck type stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But there's always a team like that. It was a couple of years ago, it was Solihull. And I know that they're a bit more financially better off now, and it looks like they've got some structure to the club. But go back 4 or 5 years, they didn't. But they came and they were knocking about in the playoffs, playing a brand of football that obviously people didn't like to watch, but they were successful in doing it. So there'll be a couple of fan bases that are sat there right now thinking this is going to be a great season. And unfortunately, by Christmas, they're going to be thinking, and by the end of the season, some poor manager is going to be getting it. And that's just the nature of the league and the nature of football.
Very interesting, Kev. Your thoughts on that debate, Leigh?
What on the sort of the teams?
Mentality of players, big names dropping down.
I think I agree with Kev. I mean, I think we all know, like Kev says, if somebody's going to come and weigh you in, if you're earning £2,000 a week playing in League One, and yet some team in the National League wants to come and pay you £5,000 a week, you're going to take the money, aren't you? If you know you're never going to make that step up to the Championship or the Premier League, you need to do everything you can to support your family, make as much money as you can, because it is a short career, particularly in the lower leagues. Like Kev says, you never come across the money that's going to make you settled for the rest of your life. So I have nothing against these players taking the money at this level, because they struggle just as the rest of us. It's not like Lionel Messi on a 50 million a year contract, is it? So, no, I totally agree with them. But it does make me laugh because Kev's right. You never see him saying, "Look, someone's just weighed me in here. That's why I've actually come." Because we all know that's the real reason why. And then they trot out the old, "It's a great project. It's very ambitious. The club's matching my ambitions. It's going to be a great journey." That's the one that always gets trotted out as well. So I've
because they've just bought a nice new car. That's why.
yeah. So no, I have no problems with it at all.
Dale, we have an educated lot that watch these shows. Nico, Dale Pikett, Paul, Histon now play in the Conference North. I watched them. Hey, this is low, not far from you as a Derby boy. I watched them lose to Belper Town in the first game of this new season. Belper are decent now, Belper.
Yeah, I've played at Belper. Yeah, that's they did the pitch the wrong way round, if I remember rightly. Instead of having it so it drains off, everything drains in when I played there. No, it was Histon were intimidating. They were intimidated. We got we had them in the semi-finals of the playoffs the year we went up, and we went there with a 2-0 lead, beat them 2-0 at Plainmoor. And then at their place, they absolutely battered us physically. Like the ball had a headache. It was just in our box constantly, and it was all hands on deck. And when we finished, there's loads of videos of it where there was no celebrations. We were all knackered, and it was all just on to the next game. Thank God we've got out of this, but they were brutal. And there will always be a Histon coming through, a team that's up against it. Boreham Wood did it. Boreham Wood have generally punched above their weight a little bit in terms of certainly resource and fan base. They've got their academy and all that kind of thing that funds them quite nicely. But and a lot of the stuff that the fans don't necessarily know, there's quite a lot of those football clubs out there that make out they've not got much money because it's little old Solihull or little old Boreham Wood or wherever it is, when actually they're putting a bit about themselves as well. And that they're the ones that go under the radar because they haven't got the pressure on them that, say, the Wrexham players have. Everybody knows that Wrexham should win the league if it was about finances and the calibre of the manager and all that stuff. So that brings a certain pressure with it. Oxford struggled with that in the National League. It took them a while to get up because every time they went behind at home, they had 10,000 fans going mental at them. That brings its own pressures. So it is, I think, like you guys are saying, it's going to be a fascinating watch throughout the season. If we have these conversations, we're going to be made to look stupid over and over again by the predictions that we make and how wrong we get it. But the one thing I'll stick to, you've got this on tape now, at the end of the season, at least 2 of those teams will not be in the playoffs.
It's a good shout. It's a good
shout. Just Nico, what was Becky's teams like at Histon? Because I used to go and watch Lincoln when Becky was in charge there, and some of the stories that you used to hear about what he used to do just to wind the opposition up. I mean, trays of tea that were lukewarm, music really loud in the home dressing rooms to the other manager because the dressing rooms are next together. It was so loud that the opposing manager couldn't hold a team talk because he was just drowned out by the music.
Yeah, I played at Histon in the league game that season, and he managed to get kickoff delayed through crowd congestion was the official line, when actually what it was 3 or 4 of his players had got caught in traffic. So he'd managed to find a way to get the game delayed so that he got to put his strongest team out because they weren't going to make it. I know of loads of stuff that he used to do, or that he used to grow he used to get the groundsman to cut the middle of the pitch but leave the corners long.
Corners very long, yeah.
And the bit that I didn't know this until I kind of got talking to other people, but by all accounts, he was a proper footballer. He was a
very good, midfielder,
really good footballer.
Yeah,
and when he got into management, he was absolutely nuts. The air raid siren that he used to play at Lincoln, and I think he did. He used to put like fish down the back of the radiators and then crack it up to as hot as it can be. So you go in there and you roast it, and your dressing room smells of fish. I personally just think that'd get you wound up to go and play, but obviously it was mind games back in his day. So fair play to him, and you can't knock what Histon did. They got really close to getting in the Football League, which is some achievement for them because they weren't throwing money around. They just had a load of good London-based boys that had been released from higher clubs. And I spoke earlier about finding those kind of rough gems. They found a few of them because if you look at that, if you get a team sheet up from that year, half a dozen of that team went on and had good careers in the league. So he did something right.
Yeah, he always had a good eye on a player, John. Whatever people say about him and his antics off the pitch, I think, if I remember that Lincoln team, Gareth Ainsworth was one person that he brought in. Dean Walling, Kevin Austin, all went on to have really good careers.
No, definitely. Just nuts that a footballer of that kind of caliber would just want to whack the ball as far as he could and intimidate people.
Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about players. Managers, Nico. So Wrexham are pushing the boat out at all levels. Les Reed, technical, whatever his role is at Wrexham. Phil Parkinson. I mean, I don't know how much you've come across Phil. I've got a lot of respect for Phil. He's got quite a few promotions on his CV. He's managed quite a diverse portfolio of the clubs. Is it the first time he'll have been in the National League as a manager?
Yeah, I think so. I've come across him a few times. I played against him when I was playing and he was managing a few times. It always seemed all right. I know Parky's assistant better because he was assistant at Notts when I was playing. Steve Parkin. So that's his assistant. So do you remember Steve Parker, ex-Rochdale manager?
Yeah. He went to Hull for a bit as well, didn't he? I think.
Yeah, so he had a good run. He was Rochdale, and then he kind of he came in at Notts as assistant, and I was always kind of blue-eyed boy. Didn't really fall out with many people, but Parky gave me a couple of proper hairdryer treatments about that far of me, and he went absolutely mental. In fact, actually, no, I tell a lie. I'd fallen out every reserve young lads who didn't deserve it, and we weren't doing very well. So I'd stepped in and said something, and we'd had a bit of like you do in the dressing room. It's not me, by the way. When I say it, it feels like an out of body experience. But we'd had a bit of a, you shouldn't be talking to them like that. It's not their fault the first team are losing kind of go. And I got called in the office the next day, and Parky came up and he had me. But the beauty of Parky was he's one of those old school guys where he'll have you, and if you stand up to it, which my standing up to it was I didn't cry. I kind of stood my ground and didn't, because when he's talking, you're going further away, and the next day he just walked up to me, went, brilliant, well done, took it well, shook my hand, and that was it. And there's not many guys like that around. He was really, say it as it is, over 21 club, get on with it, thanks very much. So I think they've probably got a reasonable mix, and that was 20 years ago. So I imagine he's learned a hell of a lot in that time, and he's still in and around the game. He was a good coach then, so I'd like to think he'll probably be a very good coach now.
So given Phil's experience, several promotions on his CV, although new to the National League, you don't think that will be a barrier? Because I guess manager of Wrexham is going to have to cope with an awful lot of pressure as manager of that club, isn't he?
Yeah, but then he's just come from Sunderland. So, Wrexham, you're under pressure from X amount of fans, and it's a big club, and they should do well. And obviously it's a totally unprecedented type of thing they've got going on. Whereas at Sunderland, you've got tens of thousands of fans at you constantly if you're not getting it right. And by all accounts, it didn't quite go his way up there. So I think a guy who's had the positive experiences that he's had and the understanding of what can work in a league that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to find a team to be competitive in, I would like to think he'll do quite well. There's been certain kind of, Mullin is probably the only one who they've taken from a higher league, but they're not taking flair players. Mullin is a get it in the box and I'll score for you kind of player. He's not. They're not signing League One kind of flair players who want to take people on, and which looks great in pre-season and looks great when the pitches are good. But try doing that, away at who they got. Altringham's a bad example. Their pitch is always good, but try doing that away in the National League on one of the pitches that's fallen to pieces by January. Yeah, there you go. Like that type of thing. You don't get that in League One. Every pitch is brilliant, for the most part. And in the Championship, where he has been, every pitch really is excellent, and you're not got to worry about the elements as much. So I think they seem to have recruited quite sensibly. Although they've gone for big players, they've not gone for lads way out of National League level, because I think sometimes that backfires. They've never seen it before. They've never seen tiny little changing rooms where you can get that. In the National League, to be fair to it, has come on massively. If you'd have asked, if we'd have been having this conversation when I was playing, I'd have been reeling off team after team. Like Histon was one of them, where it's intimidating just turning up there. Like the tiny little pokey places, the pitches are terrible. There's a gale force wind howling down because there's no stands anywhere. They've not got that as much now. I mean, you've got some nice places to play in the National League. So I think that side of it's probably eliminated a little bit. But pressure does crazy things to people. Expectation does crazy things to people. And sometimes they fly with it and it can look great. And I'm sure it'll make a great documentary, which I think they're doing up there on it. And sometimes not quite so much.
It's the first season, thinking about it, that I can recall that nobody's really talking about the clubs who have come down to win promotion. No one's really talking about Grimsby or Southend, which I find really bizarre, because when obviously Notts got relegated everyone was like, they're such a big club, they'll be one of the first ones to bounce back. But Grimsby and Southend, nobody's really giving them too much of a chance. Everyone's talking about the same teams, your Chesterfields, your Stockports, your Wrexhams, your Notts. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it is a bit different, isn't it? But when was the last time Hollywood came down to the National League?
Well, there is that, yeah.
one of the Wrexham podcasts similar to this had a chat with me yesterday, and there is apparently a real chance. Nobody knows, but it is apparently a definite possibility that Ryan Reynolds is going to fly in for the game on Monday. Because obviously it's the first they're away.
The one thing I've got to say, it doesn't look like those guys are messing about. They're all over social media with it. They're backing it all the way. I probably shouldn't say this on a live thing. I want to be taken seriously, but Ryan Reynolds has always been a bit of a man crush of mine. So I'd quite happily go to the game if he was there. And I'm sure that type of feel, they're going to get their fan base. They're sponsored by TikTok. I mean, they are going to have every resource they could possibly want to be successful. But you have to give those two guys credit that have come in. They've been getting all their Hollywood mates on it. The TikTok stuff, all that. They're committed, haven't they? And they must have a lot of other stuff going on. So I think that it might, you talked earlier about these wealthy guys who it's a bit of a plaything and they don't really do much with. This has a different feel to it. It feels like they're not likely, and probably the way the American guys do things. They invest in clubs for the investment, not for you better win right now. So I don't see them being a couple of psychos who come in and sack managers after 2 months and all that kind of stuff. I would imagine with their background and the franchise way things are done in America, that they'll have a very different way of doing things.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, as much money as they've got, they've actually appointed some really good football people. They've got Les Reed on board there. They've got Phil Parkinson, knows the game inside out. They just seem to have appointed good people at all levels of the football club, people who know the game. It'd be really interesting to see how that all unfolds. They're not going to be short of a bob or two, but like you say, pressure does funny things to people, doesn't it?
Yeah, if they're committed, if they try and do things the right way, I think there's a club not far from where you're at up there that's got a very wealthy owner who it's a bit of a plaything, and it looks to be going horribly wrong for them right now. These guys, I have to say that they do look like they're in it for the long haul, for better or worse, which I would be quite reassured as a Wrexham fan. Really interesting season for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of American sports models. They are the best sports marketeers. I know it's not gone too well for them at Swansea, but as a rule of thumb that you mentioned there, Kev, normally the Americans know how to run, operate, and market professional sports franchises. We call them clubs; they call them franchises. Did you see the Hollywood sign, the Wrexham sign, which has got a bit of a mixed review, to be fair? But I thought it was quite clever myself. But it's done its job, though, isn't it? Because everybody's talking about Wrexham.
But with all of this,
it's good or bad, everyone's talking about it.
Everybody's talking about them, but what a target on their back for every team that plays them. That is the downside. They've got expectation, and every team that plays them has almost got a free hit. The manager's got a very easy team talk. There's any number of angles that they could go at and attack and use to psych up their own players. They are a walking target. So again, for all of the resources that they've got, if they go up, it'll be credit to all of them around, the same as it will be for any other guys this season, because only one automatic spot, it really doesn't seem fair when you look at the investment and the fan bases and the size of football clubs that are at that level now.
Not going to change, though, is it? I mean, there will be several clubs that will be arguing to expand promotion and relegation between the Football League and the National League, given I think Mark Stallard, one of your old teammates, Nico, came up with it's a brilliant stat. It's something like 17 out of the last 20 teams who have been promoted from the National League have stayed in the Football League. Great stat.
Yeah, I think you do well. There you go. Whoever's listening, who are the three that went down? That'll take them a while, surely.
Well, I suppose you'd class Torquay as one, wouldn't you? Having gone up, come back down again. I don't know.
Well, no, because they stayed up for a few years. I mean, in terms of gone up and then gone straight back down, I can't remember one.
No, I can't. Not off the top of my head. No, I'd have to look it up. Yeah.
I cannot, and I never ever feel that they would. I think Barrow were probably the closest to coming down for a while that had just gone up. I think if Sutton stay up this year, then kudos to them.
Yeah.
But other than that, generally speaking, when those teams go up, there's almost a feel that they might go again.
Yeah. Saturday then. So Torquay, Nico. How hard is it going to be for Torquay this year? You spoke about a big churn of players. The manager, he's been around the block a few times. Will it take him a little while to get things going again?
My gut would say yes. My gut would say that if Torquay finish top 5 this season, I think that would be a massive achievement for the manager and the players that have come in. You know, they've had a couple of seasons where he's not had to change much. They've got promoted, like always. There's a few that move on for bigger and better. There's a few casualties that weren't quite there, but the core stayed together. And they kind of had their disrupted season because of COVID, like everybody did, but they kept that core together. And then obviously they started last season like a runaway train, and probably because of that continuity, this is the first season he's probably had there where he's really had things against him in the sense of players leaving, not a lot of time to regroup and get them back together, and coming off the back of such a devastating way to lose in the playoffs. So I think if I was him, if I could be hanging around those top 10, top 8 places between now and Christmas with the idea of a run as and when we start clicking going into January and beyond, I think that would be not that you can pick how it goes, but he'd be fairly happy to be within touching distance, I'd imagine, going into the kind of winter months.
Ian Burchnall is very much preaching a kind of a total football philosophy. It's very attack orientated. We've heard Leigh talk about, a front three, whichever way, however you want to badge that, of Kyle Wotton, the fulcrum at the top, and you then have 2 very charismatic, goal-scoring flair players, Ruben Rodrigues and Kel Roberts. Notts are kind of looking to do it in a slightly different way to some of the other fancied promotion teams. How hard is that in the National League? Is there a formulaic way in which clubs have over the past 3 or 4 years achieved promotion?
Yeah, who are you asking?
You, to start with. He'll just agree with you. He'll go, absolutely.
Everything what this man said.
Honestly, hand on heart, if they play total football and get promoted, I'll eat my hat. All the way through. If
you've got to adapt. Yeah.
If his philosophy, I don't know him. I don't know enough about him to have an opinion on him as a person. I see the same things online and interviews and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of people that have their philosophies and stick by them.
Yes.
And I've worked for people whose philosophy was, if plan A isn't working, do plan A better. And there's a strength to that. There's a continuity. There's a belief if things are going well. But for the level of footballer, with all due respect, because I was one of them, playing in the lower leagues, to be expected to play total football throughout all conditions and the way the pitches go, and under the pressure of knowing that if you give the ball away in certain areas, and I said this last year when one of your questions came in on the chat, if I played against Notts knowing what they do, I would press and press and press. And if they're good enough to play through me over and over again and score, then fair enough. But I know if I put real pressure on them and if I get an early goal or they make an early mistake, that can become a real big problem for teams that play that way. I mean, I'd hate to be one of these guys that just launches it, because it's a little bit hit and miss. There's a way of doing it. There's a good way of coaching it. And you see teams being successful doing it without a doubt. But I would like to think a mid-ground at this level. And then if you've got this ideal that you want to play to, work your way up as your resources start to get better. And we spoke about the pitches in League 2 being better than the National League and League 1. Work your way up, add bits to, who am I to say? But my opinion would be scaffold it. Have a couple of out balls, have a way of playing that plays to your strength so you can get the ball down in their half and play. But then as you go up the leagues, if you want to develop into real total football, you'll get the finances that come with that. You'll get the resources, you'll get better players, you'll get better pitches. And Bournemouth would be the example I'd give on that. When they were League 2, they used to hit big Steve Flack. He used to bring the ball down, bring the midfielders in, ball went out wide. They were exciting. And you wouldn't say they were long ball by any stretch, but they weren't total football. Oxford was similar under Chris Wilder. ball into the front two. Constable they used to have there, and Jack Midson, those guys. Bring the ball into play, get your midfield players on it, get the ball out wide. And they had guys that had pace like Alfie Potter and these guys that could do damage with the ball. But as they went up the leagues, they refined it and they knew that they had better players and the style of play in the different leagues was different. So they could do. I would love to see a team absolutely pass the way out of the conference. But the last team that tried it were Forest Green, and Mark Cooper changed the way he played about 4 times in the season. So I know I played against it. We were going into Christmas. I was managing at Torquay. We'd prepared for total football because we'd had them watched. We'd looked at all the film. We'd looked at their games, and it was all the goalkeepers rolling it out sideways. They were trying to play, but they'd been on a bad run. And when they played against us, they had Kiefer Moore up front, and everything got absolutely launched on the diag, and they played off that. And they did that throughout kind of December, January, February. And then he had another flip and they went back to playing a bit more. And they tried to play football when they lost at Wembley in the playoff final. So he flipped. He didn't have a plan A that he absolutely stuck to. He had a couple of options that he would go around. But Forest Green were known as a footballing team. That would be my take. And I would love to be proven wrong. But I just think that you've got to know the players that you're dealing with, and the plays the way you're going to play, all that kind of stuff. But we will see.
Great knowledge. What a great answer. I wasn't expecting all that. Leigh, follow that. Come on, give us
everything what he said. That's what I was going to say. How can I top that? No, I generally think that I think Notts will be fine for these few months when the pitches are lovely and it's very sunny, etc. It's nice, and it's the problem months that I think are November, December, January, when your pitches start to turn and they become a little bit more bobbly, and you don't get enough time on the ball, and it's the horrible Tuesday nights away. The Championship games. They're the games that that help you win the titles along the way. I'll be really interested to see how Notts deal with that. When the pitches start to turn and become a lot more bobbly, because. As we know, it's 3-5-2. It's passing football, and it looks lovely on the eye right now and early on in the summer months. But can you do it? Like they say, can you do it at Stoke on a Tuesday night? Can you do it at Wealdstone on a Tuesday night? When the rain's howling and the wind's coming in, and wait and see. And again, that's another fascinating layer of the season.
See, my question to you, Leigh, because you speak with Ian basically every week. Do you think he's going to revise the kind of, it's not a cavalier approach, but the purist approach, and change it according to conditions and away on a Tuesday, wherever they're at, and it's belting down? Or do you think he is going to be fairly pure in the way he wants the team to play?
I think he'll be fairly pure, mate. I genuinely do. I think what we see now is what we'll see throughout the course of the season. Now, whether that, as Kev said, gets them out of the league, we'll have to wait and see. But I do believe that he is very much, his philosophy is to get the ball down and play. We've seen that. Be brave, be expansive. I just wonder, if I look at other coaches who, if you look further up the ladder, if you're talking the peak, the coaches at the peak of their powers, does Jurgen Klopp ever change his philosophy? No. Does a Pep Guardiola ever change his philosophy? No. So I think I don't think Ian will change. To be honest, I don't see it. And even if Notts wanted to become a long ball team, I don't think they've actually got the players to be a long ball team. If that makes sense, they've signed players to fit his way of playing. You did talk, Kev just talking about Kiefer Moore, lumping the ball up front. I don't see a centre forward target man in that kind of mould. You need to have the players to do it. And I think Notts and, their whole recruitment ethos has been about fitting the whole 3-5-2 system. The centre halves carrying the ball out into midfield, stepping up, stepping in. And, I just don't see it. But like I say, I'm fascinated to see how it all unfolds, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing what one defeat can do, like you've just said, Kev, isn't it? What about dark horses? I mean, as I'm on a roll, I had Notts to win the title in my top 7, and my surprise package was Dagenham and Redbridge. So I was off to a bit of a fly. They won 3-1 at Stockport. Darryl McMahon, He wasn't he in charge when Ebbsfleet had a few quid and he got them pretty close, didn't he?
Yeah. No, he seems pretty sensible. Seems a pretty good manager. Knows the level. Dagenham have had a few tough years for one reason or another. Have they still got Tim Howard investing in them? They have.
They have. Right.
So again, if they've got stability behind the scenes now, which they hadn't had for a few years, that's big. Players you never consciously think about it, but you don't know many clubs that are completely all over the place off the pitch that are stable on it. They tend to go hand in hand. So I think if they've got that stability and he's got that, it's a great catchment area because all those boys getting released from your Chelseas and your West Hams and your Tottenhams, you've got a lot of clubs, but you've also got a lot of players to pick from. And so, that's not a bad shout for a dark horse in that sense. I think Solihull, if they can be classed as a dark horse, good manager, good catchment area again, stability and some kind of structure behind the club now. I think they're kind of part full-time or full part-time at this point. I'm not sure which way around that would be, but they train more than your average part-time team would probably be a fair way of putting it. So I think there's a few, and this is why I say that's why Stockport, Chesterfield, Torquay, Notts, Wrexham, those five, then all those five won't be the top five. There's no chance. There will be somebody that comes like a Dagenham that gets on a roll, that has a feel-good factor, that has a tight-knit group of players, that doesn't get hit by a COVID issue or injury problems. And there'll be at least one of those groups that goes on. And they're always the dangerous ones because they're the ones that have got less to lose until it gets to the business end. And then they sometimes get found out when they realise they might get promoted.
Phil Brown, of course, is a seasoned manager. And as Leigh said, the two relegated clubs from the Football League last season have largely gone under the radar. He's at Southend. Southend, I think they took 1,200 fans to Kingsley. They won. You come across Phil Brown much at all?
Believe it or not, I actually had a game of golf with Stal when he came down to do the radio for the Notts playoff, and Phil Brown was at the golf club. So I don't know who he was trying to sign. And I walked past him on the way in, and he had a bright pink shirt on, like he does. Like he's always off his head, isn't he? And I thought, I swear, I'm pretty sure he looked at me, and I thought, isn't that like Kev Nicholson? I'm sure he did that. But I looked at him, and thought, I swear that's Phil Brown. And other than that, I've again played against him as a player. He just seems extremely extrovert, slightly off his head. Obviously had his kind of golden years a little while ago. If he does again, I reeled off five there, and again totally ignored Grimsby and Southend, who are two of the biggest clubs in terms of fan base that there is in the league. And so
Paul Hurst has done it before, hasn't he? Paul Hurst.
Yeah, another that's done it. But how often do these big clubs, when they get in that negative spiral and they get in that rut, it takes a hell of an effort to turn it round. And sometimes they've got to hit absolute rock bottom before they can do that. You know, Torquay ended up going into the Conference South and then found their way back up, and they've got forward momentum now. There was one or two that had done that. And I think I fear for those clubs that have been relegated as they went down with a whimper, really, didn't they? Grimsby and Southend. It's a big thing to turn that round with so much going off. The plus point being we've just done an hour's worth of talking and barely mentioned them. So we're supposed to know what we're on about. So they're definitely under the radar. And that can be a big plus, especially for a manager to use it as fuel to fuel that fire.
Leigh, we should wrap up. I'm conscious of both of your time, and it's getting a bit dark in your conservatory, I think, now we can just see that.
Getting cold and all, by the way.
You're on your jollies this week, so you can't really give us any inside team news or injury updates from Saturday. Will you be at the game Saturday?
I'm not down to work it, actually. So my friends run a festival, so I'm due to go there at the weekend. But I did say to the media lads, I might come and watch the game as as an interested observer and not have the stress of working it. But because it's good rivalry between the two clubs, isn't there? So it should be an absolute cracker.
Kev, things going all right at Exeter at the minute? You got a good result Saturday, didn't you? I think I saw.
Yeah, really good. They're 4-0 up after half an hour, having not scored in the first three games. So again, really early days. I don't think anybody gets too carried away either way. But yeah, positive feel about the place generally, and another beginning of another roller coaster, I'm sure.
Kev, as always, thank you ever so much. Great insight, great knowledge. All the best for you wherever you are with Exeter on Saturday. Leigh, have a nice, relaxing week. That's it for us this week. The big doubleheader, Torquay at home on Saturday, Wrexham away on Bank Holiday Monday in front of the BT Sport cameras on Monday evening. Thank you to everyone for dialing in, watching and listening tonight. My thanks again to Leigh and to Kev. That's all from us. We will catch you again soon.